Hey, it's Steve, and it's driving rant time. Today's topic is going to be ice ages, because it's January 6th, and it's Chicagoland, and it is about 7 degrees out, according to my Jeep. But I want to discuss something. I want to set the record straight on ice ages. I'm going to talk about not just the Quaternary ones, which are the most recent ice ages, but some older ones. Milankovitch cycles are often cited as the driving force of ice ages. And they're a part of it, but they are not the whole thing, because if they were, we would be having ice ages coming and going on this planet since, well, we've had a modern situation. You know, plate tectonics, oxygen in the atmosphere, but we haven't. The last set of ice ages began at the beginning of the Quaternary, about 2.4 million years ago. There are other things that happened around this time. The Strait of Panama, the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans were still connected. They closed. Okay, that changed global ocean current patterns. We have a situation now where most of our continental mass is in the northern hemisphere. When you get this kind of concentration, you tend to get polar ice caps. Not necessarily ice ages, but at least ice caps. Now, Earth does not normally have ice caps. I just want to set that record straight, let alone ice ages. Before Antarctica started to freeze over about 25 million years ago, the last time Earth had ice caps was during the end of the Pennsylvanian, about 300 million years ago. And also, coincidentally, around that time was when we got these mass coal deposits. Coal, most people think coal comes from dinosaurs. Yeah, some of the coal deposits are, but the vast majority of coal deposits are from the Pennsylvanian, about 300 to 320 million years ago, if memory serves. And if we burned every last bit of coal on this planet, we would not get a Venus. I just want to mention that real quickly, because there seems to be a misconception. Don't get me wrong, global warming is happening, and humans are playing a huge part of it. But Earth is normally a very warm planet. There are exceptions to this, I'll get into that. But people need to stop claiming that if we just keep burning fossil fuels, we're going to turn into Venus. That is not going to happen. Okay, it could get a lot warmer, but it could also set off another ice age. It all depends. I mean, climate's kind of a fickle thing. But anyway, so we had about a 250 or 275 million year gap where Earth didn't have any ice caps, and this is normal. Okay, the first time for sure we know we had ice caps was about 2.5 billion years ago, because something happened. That's the Paleoproterozoic. For the first time, we have evidence of very big glaciers, of ice ages. Something else started to happen around that time. We started getting free oxygen in the atmosphere. We didn't have it before then. Not in anywhere near the quantities of today, but it started. Now, those glacial deposits are in the Huronian supergroup in Ontario, some in Australia, some in Africa. They're all over the world. Now, Milankovitch cycles probably had absolutely nothing to do with this, because, well, they probably didn't exist as they are today then. The moon was a lot closer, the sun was dimmer, we still had an atmosphere comprised mostly of carbon dioxide. The continents were in totally different places. Plate tectonics, modern plate tectonics as we know it, was just getting started. So a lot of things are changing. We were becoming a modern planet, even though there was no multicellular life and single-celled life was still in the oceans. We started leaning towards a planet of today. Now, those first glacial cycles back in the Paleoproterozoic 2.5 billion years ago, actually more like, there's several cycles, but about 2.3 to 2.5 billion years. We don't know exactly when they're, because unlike the Quaternary, the modern glaciers, the Quaternary period, which we're technically still in, we have lots of good evidence for when these glaciers came, retreated, came, retreated, came, and retreated. We don't have that with the rock settle, because the further you go back in time, the rock record becomes increasingly less complete because of erosion, plate tectonics, and things as such. But those first ice ages, those first ice ages are kind of conducive to how ice ages in the future would become. Now, some people think that was a snowball Earth event. I still have issues with the whole snowball Earth thing. But when people say snowball Earth, they usually mean at the end of the Precambrian, about 600 million years ago. They're not talking about 2.5 billion. So we look back in the rock record and we see that there have been ice ages. So they do happen, okay? But like I said, Earth does not usually have ice caps. Now, we're going to come back to the Quaternary here because I want to talk about something. I want to talk about interglacials. We are in one right now, okay? I forget, are we about third or half of the way through if you use Milankovitch cycles as your guide? But there are, like I said, there's other controlling factors that have nothing to do with astronomical phenomenon. But actually the last interglacial, before the glaciers re-advanced in what we call the Wisconsin episode, it was actually warmer than it is today. Modern human beings were around, but there were probably, maybe 100,000 of us, so we didn't really have much effect on the climate. And people seem to forget this. And as the Quaternary has progressed, the ice has advanced further for a while, but glacial periods tended to be warmer. The Wisconsin episode, the most recent one, the glaciers didn't get as far, okay? But it was much colder. It was very cold. Not actually, and when you get these cold ice ages, what happens is the ice doesn't get as far, and you get thicker ice. But that ended about 9,000 to 11,000 years ago, depending on what part of the world you were in, and now we are in the interglacial known as the Holocene. That's the Holocene epoch, but it's still part of the Quaternary. Now, when will the next ice age occur? Well, that all depends on our influence. We are an unknown variable in the equation. If you melt a lot of sea ice, what could happen is you could actually push the Gulf Stream further south, and you can actually probably trigger another ice age by doing that, and the planet might get colder, or it'll just keep getting warmer and ice will keep melting. But eventually that's going to happen anyway. Eventually where Antarctica is, it's going to move, the plate, it's going to move north again, and that ice is going to melt eventually. It might not happen for another 50 million years, but it's going to happen. So we need, when we're talking about climate change, we need to not think today is how it has always been and always will be. You need to think bigger than that, okay? Yes, we need to curb emissions. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But we can't think just because something happens in nature in our tiny little minuscule insignificant lifespans that's the way it always has been, or it's a sign of some catastrophe. You need to look at the evidence, okay? You need to sit there and monitor these things, all right? You can't just sit there and take an event and go, oh yeah, we're gonna become Venus, or go the other way, the stupid way, and go, well, you know, it snowed in Mexico, so obviously there's no global warming. You need to differentiate weather from climate. They are not the same thing, all right? Humans only live maybe 80 years. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, okay? Your little insignificant life is not the status quo for how the world and the universe works. So that's my rant. I hope you learned something. Have a good night. Try to stay warm.